terrifying happened in Indonesia this week. Something so sudden, so powerful, and so destructive that entire communities vanished in minutes. People went to sleep listening to the sound of rain and woke up trapped in rising water that refused to stop. Homes disappeared, roads collapsed, families were torn apart, and an entire island found itself facing one of the deadliest disasters in its recent history. What struck Sumatra was not just a flood. It was a wall of water powered by nature's full fury, and it left behind a trail of devastation that the world cannot ignore. Welcome back to Nature's Fury, the channel where we uncover the world's most powerful natural events and explain the stories behind them. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an update on the extreme forces shaping our planet. Take care of yourselves because the world is changing fast, and these stories remind us why staying informed matters. Today, we bring you one of the most heartbreaking and shocking disasters of the year: the deadly floods and landslides that tore through Sumatra, Indonesia, leaving more than 100 people dead, hundreds missing and thousands homeless. This is not just news. This is a story of survival, destruction, and the incredible strength of communities facing the unimaginable. Indonesia is no stranger to natural disasters, but what happened on November 28, 2025, will be remembered as one of the worst flood events in the country's recent memory. What began as persistent rainfall earlier in the week quickly turned into a full-scale catastrophe. For days, dark clouds hovered over Sumatra. It was the kind of rain that seemed endless, thick, heavy, and unforgiving. People assumed it was just another monsoon surge, something they had seen all their lives. But this time, the sky had something far more dangerous in store. By midweek, local weather stations were reporting rainfall levels far beyond normal. Rivers rose faster than expected. Hillsides softened and became unstable. Villagers noticed streams turning muddy, wider, and louder. But few imagined the disaster that was coming. In the early hours of November 28th, the situation shifted from worrying to catastrophic. Thunder echoed through the mountains. Rivers burst their banks. Floodwater rushed down valleys with terrifying speed. Families were jolted awake by the sound of water smashing through doors, windows, and walls. In minutes, peaceful neighborhoods transformed into drowning landscapes. Towns and villages were swallowed so quickly that there was no time to evacuate. Roads collapsed like sand. Bridges were torn apart and carried away by powerful currents. Entire districts disappeared under mud, debris, and swirling brown water. Emergency warnings were issued, but most communication lines had already failed. Mobile networks went silent, electricity cut out, rescuers struggled to contact the most affected regions. By sunrise, one thing was clear: Sumatra was facing a nightmare. North Sumatra took the most devastating hit. The scenes emerging from this region were almost too painful to watch. Massive landslides came crashing down hillsides, swallowing everything: homes, cars, entire blocks. Trees and rooftops floated like toys in a whirlpool of destruction. Local police spokesperson Ferry Walentukan described the conditions as some of the worst he had ever seen. By Friday evening, the official count had already reached 70 people dead, more than 100 seriously injured, and at least 65 still missing. These numbers rose hour after hour. Walentukan said rescuers were operating in full emergency mode, doing everything possible to save lives. But accessing remote communities was nearly impossible. Roads were buried. Landslides blocked entire valleys. Communication networks were destroyed, leaving many areas completely cut off. Rescue teams pushed forward carrying ropes, boats, axes, and chainsaws. They cut through debris, waded through chest-deep water, and crawled across unstable, landslide zones where one wrong step could trigger another collapse. Helicopters were on standby, but the relentless rain made flying dangerous. For many families trapped in remote villages, the wait for help felt endless. Heartbreaking videos began circulating online. Thick mud flows rushing down mountainsides, houses collapsing like paper structures, people clinging to rooftops, cars tumbling in the current like stones. One video from West Sumatra showed an entire building swept away in seconds. For the rest of the world, these were shocking images. But for the residents, those seconds contained their entire lives. In the city of Sibolga, more than 30 deaths were confirmed. In West Sumatra province, officials reported 22 dead and 12 missing. with rescue operations continuing around the clock. But the floods were only part of the catastrophe. Landslides triggered by the relentless rain brought new devastation. In Parambunan, a massive landslide buried multiple houses in seconds, killing 2 people instantly. Witnesses described it as a roaring wall of soil breaking loose from the mountain. Videos showed dust clouds rising into the air as huge chunks of the hillside gave way and swallowed everything below. In Aceh, Indonesia's westernmost province, entire towns were submerged. Rainfall continued for hours without slowing down. Roads transformed into rivers. Hillsides crumbled. More than 1,500 people evacuated as water surged through their neighborhoods. Schools, clinics, and public buildings were heavily damaged. Power lines collapsed, leaving towns in complete darkness. Repair crews were deployed, but blocked roads and unstable terrain made progress painfully slow. Residents of Padang described waking up to the roar of water crashing into their homes. Many families escaped with only seconds to spare. By the time they reached safety, their houses were already underwater. Indonesia's disaster agency deployed helicopters carrying food, medicine, blankets, and emergency supplies. But northern regions like Sibolga and central Tapanuli remained isolated. Communication was destroyed beyond repair, officials said. Families outside the region had no way to know if their loved ones were alive. Meteorologists soon revealed the culprit behind this disaster, a rare tropical storm named Senyar. Storms almost never form in the Malacca, straight because of its proximity to the equator. But not this time. Storm Senyar formed unexpectedly, fueled by unusual temperature patterns and atmospheric instability. Experts noted that Indonesia had been experiencing more cyclone-like weather systems in recent years, even though the country lies outside traditional cyclone zones. Senyar delivered unrelenting rainfall, triggering flash floods and landslides across multiple provinces. What happened in Sumatra wasn't just a random storm. It was a warning that the climate around us is changing faster than we ever imagined. And every year the risks grow higher. For decades, Indonesia has faced heavy monsoon rains, but the rainfall from Senyar was far from normal. It was extreme, record-breaking, and powered by changing climate patterns scientists have been warning about for years. Meteorologists studying Senyar discovered something alarming. The surrounding ocean's surface temperature had risen significantly. Warm oceans act like fuel for storms. The hotter the water, the more powerful storms become. And because of this warming, Storm Senyar grew into a far more intense system than anything previously recorded in the region. Areas near the equator rarely produce cyclones, but rising temperatures have changed the rules. Indonesia, a country filled with low-lying communities and mountainous villages, now faces storms where storms should not exist. Climate scientists also point to another troubling factor. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. More moisture means heavier rain falling in shorter periods of time. That is exactly what happened in Sumatra. Hours worth of rainfall fell in minutes. Days worth of rain poured down in a matter of hours. Rivers overflowed instantly. Hillsides crumbled before residents could react. Low-lying areas flooded with terrifying speed. This is the new reality. Rainstorms are no longer predictable or manageable. Another major factor behind the disaster was deforestation. Much of Sumatra's forests have been cleared for farming, palm oil plantations, and illegal logging. Forests act as natural sponges, absorbing rainwater, holding soil together, and preventing landslides. Without them, the land becomes unstable and vulnerable. When the heavy rains hit, there was nothing to hold the soil in place. Water rushed downhill at deadly speed. Landslides grew larger. Floods traveled faster. Villages that should have been safe became exposed and unprotected. Despite being one of the most disaster-prone nations in the world, many Indonesian regions still lack proper early warning systems, strong flood defenses, reliable communication networks, and safe evacuation routes. When storms intensify, residents have only minutes or sometimes seconds to react. This disaster exposed how desperately these systems need improvement. What happened in Sumatra is a glimpse of the future. If global temperatures continue to rise, more storms will form in unusual places. Rainfall will grow heavier, floods will grow faster, and landslides will become more deadly. Vulnerable communities will always suffer first. This is not just Indonesia's problem. It is a warning for the entire world. And that brings us to the most important message. Nature is changing, the planet is heating. Storms are growing stronger, faster, and more unpredictable. What happened in Sumatra is not an isolated event. It is part of a much larger pattern that affects all of us. We cannot ignore these signals anymore. Thank you for watching this detailed report on the devastating floods in Indonesia. If you found this story important, informative, or eye-opening, make sure you subscribe to Nature's Fury so you never miss updates on how our world is changing. Stay safe, stay aware, and take care of yourselves and the people around you.